So last week at our church birthday, we were thinking about the way we're wired up and connecting together and so on. And we're going to sort of develop that this week. But the question I kind of jotted down at the beginning of the week when I was thinking about this passage from 1 Corinthians 12 and the whole theme that we're looking at the moment was, why does God bring his people together in a church or as a church? Why does God bring us together as a church? And my answer, hopefully your answer as well, would be to serve. To serve. To use the different gifts, the different abilities, the different characteristics of each individual person and bring them together to serve together as one. It's a fairly obvious thing, but God is ingenious, isn't he? Who else would think of such a thing? To bring a diverse group of people together and be able to kind of use that mixture of people to form one body that can function as one. That then that one body, Highfield Community Baptist Church in our case, could serve each other and serve others outside of the community of the church. What an ingenious way of working with his people. And I spoke a little bit last week about shape coming out of Romans 12. Our shape should not come from how the world shapes us, but how the Lord shapes us by his Spirit within. We looked last week at Romans 12 and thought about the various wordings and that, but I found this one that sort of said, don't let the world shape you, but let the Lord shape us as his people. So we are brought together by the Lord, and that's why we're here today. That's why we're here as Highfield Community Baptist Church, and we have been shaped by him. Shaped by him individually, and shaped by him corporately. And serving and ministering is of primary importance in Christ's church. Ministry is what we should be doing. Each one of us is a minister. I still call myself the minister of the church, but it's kind of not technically true, because we're all the minister of the church. We should all be doing ministry within the church and outside of the church on behalf of the Lord. So we're all ministers in that sense. It's so easy, isn't it, to kind of just sit and listen, or to read what the Bible says. But we're really, even taking on from where we were last week in Romans 12, be living sacrifices. That means doing things. When you are living sacrifice, it means you are sacrificially giving to the Lord and his service. And should not be just kind of sitting and listening or sitting and reading and so on. We should be all actively taking part. That is why the Lord brought us here as a church. As members of the church, as friends of the church, as part of the fellowship. That's why we have been brought together, that we might serve and actually live out our lives in service using the gifts that we have been given. And the truth is, if we forget we are called to serve, our focus changes. Again, it probably sounds obvious, we don't think about it, but in practicalities, if we actually forget that we are called to serve, and you kind of think, well, I'm here to worship, I'm here to be with friends, I'm here to, as a church. If we forget we're being called to serve, then our whole focus changes. If you forget as a Christian, as a Christ follower, that you are called to serve, then your life focus changes. And dare I say, perhaps we start getting shaped more by the world than by the Lord. And we live, certainly in the Western world, in a very me-centered shape. And more as the years go on, you will have noticed that in our Western world, the way people live, the way people speak, our advertising, our media, whatever you go on, whatever you're part of, it's a very me-centered shape, our world. And if we lose focus on the fact that the Lord has called us to, well, worship Him and also to serve Him, and the two go together, then we start getting shaped by the world, and we start thinking about me. But Jesus Himself, of course, set the pattern and set the shape Himself. Remember in Matthew 20 and verse 28, this is what Jesus said of Himself. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give His life a ransom for many. That's the pattern. Even Jesus did not come to kind of say, yeah, serve me. Do things for me. Even Jesus, God's Son, said, I've come to serve. And dare we, as Christ followers, do anything less than that? So I want to spend a few moments kind of thinking about this from this passage in 1 Corinthians 12. I should also relate to one or two other Bible passages. So it's good to have the Bibles open in front of you. You can flip pages. It's good to hear pages turning or silent tablets being moved. Verses 1 and 2, which we didn't have read this morning, but hopefully again you've been reading during the week, this has been part of our Readers 1 passage, talks about this whole idea of ministry, that we are all to minister, we are all to serve. And my mind went to Matthew 20 and verse 26-28, where again our Lord says, but whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant. And whoever wishes to be first among you shall be your slave. Just as, again referring to Himself, the Son of Man did not come to serve, but to minister, and give His life as a ransom for many. So when we minister, we serve. When we serve, we minister. And that is our instruction from the Lord Himself. There is no escaping the issue. There is no opt-out clause. We are all to serve and minister for the Lord. And right from Paul to the other writers of the New Testament, right from Jesus Himself, you read through them, it just keeps talking about serving other people, serving the Lord. William Booth, founder of the Salvation Army, was interviewed near the close of his life, and this is what he said. God had all there was of me. There have been others who had greater plans, greater opportunities than I. But from the day I got a vision of what God could do, I made up my mind God would have all there was of William Booth. A living sacrifice of service. And my mind keeps going to those words we read in Scripture that Jesus talked about. Do you want to hear these words at the end of your life? Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into my house. Good and faithful servant. In other words, one who has served, one who has been active, one who has taken part in God's kingdom. And when we do that, like a William Booth, and we don't have to be a William Booth, we don't have to start the Salvation Army and so on, but just if we are serving faithfully, giving of ourselves, And one day the Lord's going to say, well done, you good and faithful servant. Come on in. 1 Corinthians 12, verses 15 to 22, which again wasn't read this morning, so I'm just going to read it quickly now. Now, if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as He wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts and one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. God places the members of His body as He wants. And if God placed you here at Highfield, if He brought you here, which I think most of you would say He did, if He did, then you are important to this body here at Highfield. All the parts of the body are important. And if one quits working, then the others have to work harder to compensate for that. And in fact, they're probably not equipped in the same way as you are. So if you don't be part of the body, then the thing's not going to function properly. And the size of the ministry is not important. You know, you think for a moment. I was thinking, a little eardrum inside our ears. We don't even see it. Silently. And a number of us got hearing aids. And we know that our eardrum, or maybe something around that area, isn't quite working properly. And do we miss it? These things don't work anything like an eardrum, or whatever it is that's working around that area. I was thinking also about taste buds. Don't see that neither, do you? Little things inside your mouth, or whatever they're technically called. But you know, anyone ever lost their sense of taste for a while? And the food's just, yeah. But you know, you might say, what do I need taste buds for? I don't even see it, you know, just little things in my mouth somewhere, you know. They're obviously important. Because you go without them, and the food just becomes very bland, and you go, fatty. Romans 12, that we looked at last week, verses 3 following. Do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you. For just as each of you has one body with many members, and these members do not have all the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. Connections again. Each of us belongs to each other. God brought us here. And we're not little individuals that kind of just come in and sit down and go home. We belong to each other. We're connected to each other. God made it that way. And verse 6 of that same passage in Romans 12, we have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. And this passage shows us that it is important for each of us to use the gifts that God has given to us. And again, I was just thinking about our physical body. And, you know, if we have muscles, and sometimes if a muscle hurts or something, we're kind of very tempted to just kind of sit it out. Same day the other day, there's been a Gemma kind of pulling something, I can't remember what it was now, but there was that sense of, well, you do that then, so you don't use it so much. And the Lord said, no, you don't do that, because if you don't keep it moving, it's going to waste. You've got to keep flexing it around and use it, otherwise it goes to waste and you get muscle waste. Same thing with the church that God has brought together. If God has given you a gift, the gift that God has given to you, if you don't use it, you will have gift waste. And the body then will start, Highfield Church will start limping because you're not using your gift. Each of us have got a gift that we need to use so that we function fully and we don't limp. Okay, I'm going to move on. Our shape should be determined by our ministry, verses 6 to 8 of that passage. Last week we talked about not letting the world shape us. If we do, we distort, as I said earlier, God's way of shaping us. And we're not then using that function that God has given to us. My mind went to Psalm 139. And most of us know it pretty well. But it just kind of reminded me when thinking about this subject. Verse 13, for you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. God knows us that well. He was the one that was knitting us together in the first place. He was the one giving us certain gifts and character traits which he knew were going to form not only in our mother's womb but beyond that to today. God knows us. He has plans for us. He has a purpose for us. And individually and again, corporately as a church, I'm kind of looking into spheres here. Look around you this morning. I have an advantage. Look at your shape. No, I don't mean that. We are all different. Every single person here. And I know you. And you know each other. You're all different. We're all different. But God brought us together. That was the plan. That we're not all the same. That we're all different and he brought us together and then knit us together. That we might be one body to serve him in whatever way he wants us to. But individually it's important, therefore, and I kind of finish with this idea, that we do learn what our gifting is, what our shape is, if you like, within all of this. So that we do fit together, so that we do get wired up to everybody else. And we do serve. And my kind of challenge this morning is to seek out the way in which the Lord equipped you. And never too late. Never ever too late. Because there is something that the Lord put in your life that is different to other people here. And without you using whatever that is that God gave you, we're going to be. And maybe you even, dare I say, think that Highfield is, then maybe it's you that's not functioning in the way that God wants you to. And I need to pray that one through. So discover what your gift is, or gifts are, and use them to his glory. As we come around the communion table, we're going to sing our next song, which is on the video clip, so I'm not going to put it on until we need it. And it's the Servant King. And it ties these two things together. I've just been thinking about it. Jesus, he said, but let us serve like him. Because we are a reflection of Christ here on earth, aren't we? At least we should be. And if he came to serve, we also should be to serve other people and those around us. So we're going to sing those words together now as we come around the communion table.